The whole Fed game is expectation. All right? That's what they're working on. As long as they can convince the majority of people to go left, the herd goes left. And if they start going right, then the herd's going to scatter. That's all the Fed is doing. All right, let's just finish with this stagflation here.
The effects of tariffs on quantities, with the level of tariffs that, for example, have been currently applied on China, there's a fear that the supply chain may get disrupted, that firms may not be able to import their relevant stuff from China given the level of prices. If it turns into a supply shock, would the Fed's response be different than if it was primarily something which affected just prices?
So this question is on the heels of the inflation that we got in the early 2020s was because of a supply shock. This is why the Fed was saying that the inflation was transitory, because just because things are shifting around. Well, it turned out that because that was persistent, it actually flowed through the economy, and the length of time it took to flow through and the unanchored expectation actually helped to cause inflation within the regular population. And so he's saying here very cleverly, he said before, transitory, just a hint, like we know the term, and here, supply shock, like what if the tariffs cause a supply shock thing as we're reshoring manufacturing and production and all that sort of thing? Wouldn't that seep into inflation expectations into the future? In a very calm way.
So I actually had dinner at the Chicago Fed last night and with a number of directors of various parts of the Chicago Fed, and many of them are CEOs of significant companies, and this uncertainty that they're feeling and the issue with imported components to their products is just a huge issue. If you look back at the pandemic, if you remember, there was a shortage of semiconductors and a shortage of cars at a time of extremely high car demand. And it was a prolonged shortage because production couldn't keep up, and it led to an extended period of inflation. So when you think about supply disruptions, that is the kind of thing that can take time to resolve, and it can lead what would have been a one-time inflation shock to be extended, perhaps more persistent, and we would worry about that.